elopements, and vow renewals. Before you give up and elope to City Hall, come see the chapel. Let's make your wedding dreams come true. Visit lawfullyyoursweddingchapel.com to learn more and schedule a tour.
The views and opinions of the following show do not reflect those of WSMN, its owners, and/or associates.
Lisa and Robyn are two fun friends diving deep into conversations where nothing is taboo. They believe in eating dessert before dinner and wearing the bikini. They're allergic to labels, authority, and cheap shoes. Currently, they're launching themselves through life being the good time, bold enough to take risks and inquisitively asking, what's next? They hail from New Hampshire, but they could be anywhere dressed in cute clothes. If they had to share a tombstone, it would read, "Curiosity killed these cats." Your hosts, Lisa and Robyn, on the mic.
Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Lisa and Robyn on the mic. You are listening on WSMN 1590 AM, 95.3 FM. You can watch, stream, and listen on WSMN.live as well as YouTube. We are still hijacked on the platform of Facebook, but it's completely fine. You can find us on Spotify and iHeartRadio after the fact, or you can watch live on YouTube. You can also watch live on WSMN.live. And it is approaching the spring equinox, which you all know that is my favorite time of year. I love spring energy. I love the way it brings us alive and the world comes alive in New England around us. You know, you start having the little tiny green buds coming through the ground, and it just feels like a very joyous time, like we made it out of the depths of winter. So, you know, I'm all about today, even though it is raining, I'm all about the spring equinox. And Robyn is in Costa Rica having a magical time. If you follow her on Instagram, you'll see that she's got screaming howler monkeys in the morning, waking her up with the sunrise, and you'll see that she was held hostage by a tree frog when she went to go pee in the morning. You can follow along with her. And we do miss her today, but I do have a very special guest. And I will tell our listeners how we met, which is pretty typical of Robyn and I. We were shopping.
Yes,
as we do, at Baubles and Lace in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And God knows what was happening, but we probably cackling or giggling or something and trying on clothes. And
yeah, you ladies look like you were having the greatest time. Like,
yes.
I was like, who are these fun ladies? I want to meet them.
And we introduced ourselves.
Yeah.
And
I think the manager of the store that day, Emily, right? She was
yes,
in
she
there,
might have introduced us.
And she was kind of like styling you, and I was still kind of deciding on what I was going to buy. I was like, I love that place. I wasn't quite ready to go.
Yes.
And she was like, oh, these ladies have a radio show.
Oh,
and
that's
I was like, what? I'm like, oh, how fun. So I kind of like inserted myself over by you.
And then you were like, what is your radio show about? And we're like, we can't put a label on it.
Mm-hmm.
AI can't put a label on it.
Mm-hmm.
One time I asked AI, what is Lisa and Robyn on the mic radio show about? And it said, it could be anything. It could be MMA fighters. It could be, and it just listed a lot of things. And and that's the thing about Robyn and I is we're very open. We're very curious people. And we have so many loves and we have so many interests. And then you said, is this a good time to read your bio now?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my guest, Heather Fowler, has spent over 25 years of classroom experience teaching elementary students in grades K through 3. She's got a master's in educational administration and supervision. She is a certified dyslexia specialist, and she is a certified Orton Gillingham teacher and teacher trainer.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds kind of impressive. I mean,
it's so impressive. And so
when you hear it all together.
It is so impressive. And the funny thing is, so reading is my thing. Mm-hmm. It's Robyn's thing. We're talking books all the time. We had the library on. We had one of the representatives from Barnes & Nobles talking. I mean, we had shows about books. There are books in every single episode of Lisa and Robyn on the mic because they inform our life. And I have wanted to be a writer since I was really little.
Okay.
Because I wanted to contribute back to something that has made such a measurable difference in my life, which is reading. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the authors that I fell in love with and felt like were friends, I wanted that to be to somebody else. But I figured my first book had to be one of my biggest loves, which is cooking. So I took writing a cookbook, which is writing a manual. It's not writing a story.
Yeah.
Even though I did weave a story into it
Do
because
you
I couldn't help
find
myself.
like in your mind you have it all laid out? Like,
yes.
oh, this is gonna be easy. This is gonna be so easy. I'm gonna add this. I'm gonna add this, and then when you go to
Oh,
put
yeah.
it all together, it's like, well, hold on. There's so many more aspects of this than I thought. Yeah.
And I didn't know what I didn't know. And I did things wrong so many times.
Well, that's how we learn. We learn
and
from our
then
mistakes.
2020 happened, and the book that I had written cost 3 times what it would previously costing to produce.
Okay.
So they said, this isn't the book. You know, you're not going to pay $98 for a cookbook, right? It's going to be under $29 or it's not going to sell. And then you always hear all of the no's. You don't have a platform. Okay. You're not on TV.
Right.
You don't have a restaurant. And it's like, no, but I cook in my house. I cook for my friends. I cook for my family. Cooking has become a love. It's like a love language.
Yeah, it's a passion.
It's a passion.
And you want to.
And I thought, I want to be an author. This is the perfect way because cookbooks increase in sales by 4% every year for the last decade. So I thought, as a business person,
that's kind of interesting because, like, you're thinking, there's so many things you can, look up online now. So the fact that people are still interested in purchasing cookbooks and they're still going up in sales, I love that.
Yeah, and I think partly, so I'm a cookbook person, and I'm also, have you noticed, or I noticed, if you try to look up blogs, you have to read like 20 pages of text about how this was their grandmother's recipe and how the butter came from a particular part of France and it's never been the same recipe because the grandmother doesn't have the butter from France and then there's 10 ads coming up through it and you're like, I just want to, what are my ingredients?
I want the recipe.
What is my recipe?
And tips.
And the blog is making money by selling ad space, right?
Yes.
So, and the point of a blog, because people have asked several cookbook authors, why do you still put out books? And they said because every cookbook blog or every food blog turns into a book. That's the ultimate goal.
Oh, okay.
So I
didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think people are always needing inspiration for what's for dinner because it's this omnipresent, perpetual question in our mind. We're fickle, right? We are mood people. We're all mood eaters. It's not like we're having to hunt we're eating whatever I kill today. Right? We have all of this choice, and I think that choice is constantly overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so I think...
And you want to change it up.
And you want to change it up.
You get tired of the same things. I feel like you get into
a rut.
A
cooking rut. You do the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
And so I thought this is perfect, right? I'm dying to do this. And people always ask me for my recipes. So instead of individually giving out recipes... Yes.
There's proof.
There's proof. People always want them. But then... I have the author idea in my head, and I'm putting out a manual, which I'm not a manual person.
Okay.
I don't read manuals. Like my spouse one time wanted me to read the phone manual. This was maybe like 10 years ago. I'm like, I'm probably not. Because he reads manuals. He reads the dishwasher manual. He reads the motorcycle manual. Because it's logical and this is how you learn, right? That's why things come with manuals. And I'm like, I couldn't be bothered. If you have me read a manual, I'll fall asleep in like 12 seconds. Even if I wasn't sleeping. It could be 10:30 in the morning, right? Yeah. So one time he programmed my phone to speak in Spanish, so I would at least have to read how to put it back to English. And I'm like, I'll just learn all the commands in Spanish. It's fine. That's how much I don't read manuals. And I didn't consider...
it's a little dry. it's
There's no story to that.
No.
And so... I didn't know I was writing a manual.
Okay.
And that was my first problem because I kept not getting into it the proper way because I wasn't writing a manual.
Yeah, it was a different form for you.
Yeah. So, but I'm almost out the other side and I'm super excited. But that's all to talk about. I think I have so many stories in me. And reading has always been my number one love. I had parents who are readers and neither one of them went to college, both very... like Mensa smart people.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And they read. They were wide readers, reading political history, fiction too. And one of my youngest memories of reading an adult book is, and it wasn't YA. I mean, I'm going to be 53 in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Well, listen.
Right, that's my age group.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so
I'm right in there. Maybe a little plus.
Okay. You look fantastic.
Oh, I thank you.
You look fantastic, Heather. So what? but I remember there not being young adults. So you went from Beverly Cleary and Judy Blume to Stephen King.
Yeah, yeah.
Or
A lot of in
equivalent.
between,
Have
yeah.
you ever read The Confederacy of Dunces?
No.
Okay,
No.
great book.
Okay.
Great book. And what happened was my mother read this book, and she would laugh out loud. And my father, who was not a laugh out loud guy, would cry trying to read he would try to read it back out loud to my mother, and he would cry tears of laughter. And I'm like, I have to read this book.
Yeah.
So that was,
no, I have to read it now.
you have to read that book.
Wait,
And then we have to talk about
What
it.
was the name of it again?
A Confederacy of Dunces.
Okay.
And I fell in love with the story because it's a cast of characters who you think have nothing to do with each other. And they all culminate at the end to being 100% in everyone's life in a specific way.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay.
And I thought that was masterful at the time. I had never, I'm reading Judy Blume. I'm reading, Where Are You, God? It's Margaret, or whatever, whatever this,
age typical.
Yes, the little
that.
mouse that's on the motorcycle.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
all great books.
And then you're reading it about a guy masturbating in his bedroom, yelling at his mother, and you're just reading adult things. And it was my forte, or for whatever that word is, the word that it introduced me to adult life behind the scenes of adults who were pretending everything was like they had all the answers, but you read behind the scenes that they didn't know anything.
Yes, yeah, give you a little insight.
Yeah, and then I started reading about sex, like
Okay,
flowers in the attic.
Right? Oh, yes. Awesome.
Right? So and you're like, I'm 12.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I remember when I was in school around that age, somebody would come up with a little risque, but those were the books they'd be passing them on the bus,
yes.
And you couldn't tell your mom you read them, and she'd eventually find out because your mother always finds out everything, right?
And we were highlighting.
And they'd have to talk. You'd have to have the talk, and then.
Well, what ended up happening was she was like. She had found the book, and then she was like, if you're going to read a book, you're not going to read that book. Read this book. And we don't want you to have incestuous sex with your kids in the attic. We need different books for you. But it was the discussion. So, and we watched adult films where there was a sex scene or something, and we would talk. We would have conversations. So I always, reading was my number one love, and I don't know where my life would be if I didn't have reading.
Right.
So the idea of, can you tell us exactly, I know you printed out this, could you tell us what dyslexia is, actually?
So I printed this out because I wanted to get the definition correct. So this is a definition of dyslexia from the International Dyslexia Association. And it's, it's pretty complex, I think. There's a lot to it. So it says, dyslexia is a specific learning disability that's neurobiological in origin. I'll read the rest, and then I'll go back to that neurobiological part. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language. We'll talk a little bit about what that means also. That is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. Secondary consequences of this may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that it can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge.
Okay, so do you know, in my childhood, I don't even remember the word dyslexia. But I do remember, there would be the kid that would be the class clown that would be terrible in school, and then they'd figure out in the 5th grade that it was because he needed glasses.
Okay, yeah.
Of course he's not going to learn the
He's
math on the board because he can't
impeding
see.
him. Yeah.
Right, but we didn't have, I feel like.
Yeah, I don't remember hearing about it either.
Right.
And if you did, it was
Like,
myths, what you thought it might have been.
Yeah, let's talk. So let's break it down. That's really interesting. Let's talk about the neurobiological
that
aspect.
neurobiological aspect. So dyslexia is a neurobiological in its origin. It's hard to say about tongue twister, but it's if you look at the brain, right? So very basic explanation here. I'm no neuroscientist. So the brain is wired for speech. It's not wired for reading. There's no component, a reading component in the brain.
Interesting.
And those areas that help you read that are utilized in the brain are all on that left hemisphere. So is like there's in the frontal lobe, there's like a Broca's area, and that's kind of like where the speech sounds kind of occur, and then it kind of pops into the back area where that's called like the letterbox or your word formation area, and then up on the top is like the word analysis area. So think of it kind of like a triangle, bing, 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 right? And they all work together, you know, to
Simultaneously.
yeah, they have all, you know, it's kind of like a circuit. So to help us read, to help us with that word recognition. And so the studies have shown, functional MRI studies have shown, like in a typical reader who doesn't have, you know, trouble reading words, those areas, those 3 areas that are used for reading are, you know, they're lit up, like highlighted. And there's like, you know, you can kind of picture, you got a highlighted area here in the front and back in this letterbox area and up here in the word formation or the word analysis area. And then there's images of a non-typical reader, somebody that's having difficulty, and there's less of those lit up areas. So it's a neurological issue. It's not like something you can you know, fix, or like one of the myths is, oh, you'll outgrow it.
Yeah.
So it's there, and it doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. It doesn't mean that because those, you know, parts of the brains aren't activated as a typical reader. It doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. So with
so it's not an IQ issue.
No. It's just it's neurological. It's that's what you have, and it can be remediated and helped, you know. So once instruction takes place, appropriate type of instruction takes place, if you studies also have shown, like, those students after that instruction, those parts have more of that part has lit up. So it can change the makeup of the brain.
Yeah, and
but it's always going to be there, you know, but you can make it better.
Right. So that's so interesting. So we have learned, so back when we were going to school, no one even had said the word, you know, having anything to do with the brain. Like we weren't learning about the brain for any reason whatsoever, except maybe in biology, but that was more the body than it was the brain. And I think it's so great because we have these podcasts and these YouTube shows where there's, I want to say neurologists, but that's not the right word.
Yeah, it could be.
Neuroscientists.
Yeah.
Talking about the brain all the time. So I feel like now I have an image of what you're talking about.
And that was very basic. Trust
Yes.
me. I'm not a neuroscientist.
But now I can picture like an MRI scan picture and areas lighting up, and then people have a stroke. So one section of, and that's why in a stroke maybe you need to relearn to speak, because the part of the brain that uses that now either had less oxygen to it or a problem and
damaged in some way.
And damaged, so then you have to try to rewire the wires in use another section, but that's the benefit of neuroplasty. That we're neuroplastic, that our brain has the ability to constantly learn.
So interesting.
It's so interesting.
Oh my gosh, that would be something I would, you know, in my future, you know,
in your next life.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, or even now, like maybe really delve into that a little bit more, gain a little deeper understanding. My understanding is very basic at this.
Do you know who Andrew Huberman is?
No.
He's a neuroscientist, specifically about the eyes, and he puts on a free. Well, that's like where his specialty was.
Okay.
And he does a free weekly podcast, and he's been doing them for years now. And he actually interviews people, but he goes into the real weeds of the science behind motivation, behind dopamine, but like real. So sometimes I just listen to him and then I'm like, all right, I took 2 things away from that 3-hour conversation. I'll have to re-listen to that because there's so much information told by a gentleman who teaches and works at Stanford.
And sometimes when you're listening to those things, like it's like, oh, that makes sense. I've got that. And then when you step away from it and you try to relay the information to someone else, you're like, I can't. I don't even know how to explain.
You're like, you should watch this podcast because so there's this book I love called Brain Energy by Dr. Christopher Palmer, and he talks about how we've been treating mental health wrong for the last 50 years. And he's from Harvard. He wrote this book, and he has this is the neuroscience. This is the biology of what's happening in the body. If you don't want that, like, go to chapter 7 and read layperson terms for what we need to do.
Okay.
But I read the biological piece.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never relay it to you.
Yeah, I know.
But I do have a fundamental enough understanding
Mm-hmm.
that I could put it in my layman's terms that mental health is metabolic health. And your metabolism, or the metabolic energy of cells, when it's robust and healthy, it can do all of the part, it can do everything that the body needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
But the brain is its largest resource. The brain takes the most metabolic energy in the body. And the cardiovascular system is the second largest user of the metabolic system.
Wow.
So when there's not enough activity metabolically, it shunts from the largest system to try to keep as much going as possible.
Mm-hmm.
It will only give 50% to the brain that the brain actually needs.
Mm-hmm.
It might only give 70% to the heart that the heart actually needs, because it has to do everything. So if you can change metabolic health, you can cure mental illness. So you can cure schizophrenia. You can, like,
How interesting.
how interesting. So
I think you did a great job explaining that.
Oh,
anyway.
because
I feel like I learned something.
oh, good. And all I do is say to people,
And I don't think I could relay that now. I'd have
That's-
to listen to it again.
it's 400 words.
Yeah.
That's what I got from it.
Yeah,
That's
well,
my
listen,
one-liner.
yeah.
And
No,
then what
it
I say
makes
is,
sense,
you
makes
should read
sense.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Is what
yeah.
I say next. You
Yeah.
should read that book. And one of my spouse's coworkers has a kid who's been having seizures, and I'm like, can you please give her this book?
Oh, yeah.
Because they have cured people who have epilepsy with a specific keto diet.
Oh
I
my
don't know the first thing
gosh.
about it.
Yeah.
They've been doing it for 50 years. They can actually treat and get people off of epilepsy medicine.
Oh my
Certain
gosh.
seizures is like
Yeah.
grand
Imagine,
mal.
you know, as a parent,
Right.
like, wow.
having
You
this,
know, like, oh my gosh, like, you know, you're in pain watching your child
and you're
experience
helpless.
this. Yeah.
And you're helpless, and you don't have a lot of
And something so, I mean, I don't know if it's simple, but
right. If-
without medication, I feel like anything that you don't have to put medication in your body, you could do something more naturally.
right.
You think it's just a healthier way of going about things.
And he has all of these different stories about these people who were cured and remain cured
Wow.
by sticking to this metabolic piece, right?
mhm.
So another book that's just like life-changing. So Andrew Huberman and Christopher Palmer. He does podcasts too, so if someone doesn't want to pick up the book and they just want to hear what he has to say, just check out any Christopher Palmer MD podcast.
Okay.
But it's fascinating stuff, and I feel like we live in a time right now that there is the most amount of information that it's almost like too exciting. I can't even get through it all.
Right.
But let's go back to dyslexia. We've got the neurobiological piece, and then
Well,
you
let
said
me-
decoding.
Right. Let me
Yeah.
just add one more thing to that
Yeah.
neurobiological. So, one of the talking about outgrowing, like, oh, you'll outgrow it. So, but it's neurological. So it's something to have. And when we were talking about that outgrowing, I think when children are very young, before they even enter preschool, right? They're learning things at home through their oral language exposure and different things, and then they get to school, and maybe they're having a little, they're in preschool, maybe they're having a little trouble, picking up rhyming, or maybe learning the names of the letters, and they get to kindergarten, and maybe those things are still apparent, but you're like, oh well, give them a little time. They're only in preschool, they're only in kindergarten. Give them a little time, and then they get to first grade, and some of those things are still happening, or they're still having trouble. So so giving that little bit of time is kind of like saying, oh, they'll outgrow it. They're gonna get there. They're gonna get there. But the longer these things go on, the more of a gap we're getting, and then the more difficult it is to bring it back and remediate it. And then the biological part is that it is familial. So like if your son or daughter has dyslexia, their mom or dad could have had it, maybe not, or maybe it skips a generation, maybe a grandparent, maybe an aunt or an uncle, somebody directly related to you. So that biological piece is talking
like
about
genetic.
Mhm.
Yeah, like some piece of genetic piece passes down.
And it is on something that's important to note is also it's on a continuum. So it's not like I have dyslexia and everyone's the same. Every person is different. So it could be a very, very mild case, or mild level. It could get increasingly more difficult, or it could be very, very extreme. So it's not one I have dyslexia, and that encompasses everybody. You know,
Okay.
everybody's the same.
So there's almost like a spectrum.
Yes,
where
it's definitely on a continuum.
Yeah,
you know?
okay.
And
Oh,
some
interesting.
of the children who are on that mild piece, mild end of that continuum, those things can be overlooked. Like some of those things, like, oh yeah, like you'll think, oh, they're just a little more work and they'll get here, or just try a little bit harder, or this or that.
just apply yourself
Yeah,
more.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
like the kid without the glasses. Just squint.
Exactly,
Squint.
exactly.
If
And
you
the-
squint, you'll get that math. You'll get those numbers, those 8s and those 6s and those 9s
just
and those
sit a little
3s.
closer. Put the paper a little closer to your face. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And okay, so that's really interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I have so many questions actually now that we just came to that. Okay.
I'll
so
try my best.
yeah, no. So
Again, I'm not a guru. I'm not a guru.
because I was thinking that I learned when we were talking about it's going to seem really off the mark, but I promise I'm going to weave this back into the
Okay.
conversation.
I trust you.
Lead in houses, right? I'm a
Lead.
realtor,
Oh, okay. Yes,
right?
yes,
So
yes.
lead in houses. Why is lead so bad? Well, it's not necessarily that bad for the 50-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not necessarily licking door jambs and stuff for small children.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why lead exposure is so detrimental to children between 0 and 6
Oh.
is because the brain of those children has, and again, not a neuro anything, not a doctor,
Yeah,
not
me.
playing one on television,
Same here.
not
Same here.
playing one on the radio. So I'm going to use my layperson's words, the way I understood it. When you're a baby, you learn windows open up in your mind, allowing you to learn a specific set of information. And then those windows close. Open and close. Windows constantly open and closing. And the reason why between 0 and 6 it's so detrimental to have lead in there is because lead is accumulative in the brain. Kids are smaller. Any kind of toxin to a child is more detrimental than to adults because you just have, it's like an alcoholic drink to a 21-year-old is considerably different to an alcoholic drink to a 4-year-old, right? Because concentration in the body and everything else.
All those neurons
On
are
those
developing.
neurons, they're
Yeah.
developing. And there are, and I know this isn't the right word, but there are windows of time where something's going to be learned or something is not going to be learned because it shuts. Because the brain is developing at such a rapid pace and learning so many different things. So how you said, they're not really learning their letters here. It's not getting much better here. By the time we get to the first grade, you've lost 3 years of that window
Exactly.
learning
Yes,
opening, the
yes.
door to come in to let the stuff in.
Yes, where strategic intervention could have occurred early on. So
It made a bigger
sometimes-
difference.
Sometimes with dyslexia, being a teacher in school, sometimes I've seen that happen. It's like maybe it's second grade or almost going into third grade before they
Get diagnosed.
or get tested or and see where the problem lies. And by that time, not that it's the end. I mean, you
Right.
certainly can help, but it takes a little more work to get there.
Yeah,
you know?
because those windows opening and closing, it's like when you open the window, all the fresh air comes in. That's the best time for X to happen.
Right,
So if
right.
you could have caught it at pre-kindergarten,
or even younger, it could start right from the home. You
Right.
know, different things that you can do or different things to look for, and then also too, like it affects you think about like self-esteem.
Yes.
And
and your ability to have jobs later, like everything. So I have this really interesting story. This is the only story I know about dyslexia.
Okay,
And
I like it
it's
already.
the only one I have, so I'm going to give it to you guys. And I'm going to try to see if I can find the actor's name. Do you know the movie Blade? It's like from the 80s.
Yes, I've heard of it. It's
Okay.
a pretty hardcore movie, as I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
1998 horror action movie about
Okay, yeah.
vampires with Wesley Snipes.
Okay.
There's an opening scene where there's a vampire girl who locks onto a blonde guy, and of course the cast on Google is not giving me the blonde guy's name. That actor, whoever that actor is.
Okay, he's a blonde guy.
Yeah,
That's what we know.
and he's at the beginning, and he gets taken into the dance club, and he's like, "Oh yay, I'm gonna getting some tonight. These chicks, look at this rave," and he's being brought in to be eaten.
Oh, and he has no idea.
And he has no idea.
Yeah, poor guy.
I heard an interview with him where he talked about he came into Hollywood. He was undiagnosed with dyslexia. They just said he was illiterate, right? Because he's probably older than us by maybe 5 to 10 years. And so because he couldn't read, but he wanted to be an actor. He couldn't learn his lines because he
Okay.
couldn't read.
Mm-hmm.
So what he would do was have a friend say the lines to him, and he would continually, and he would memorize through verbal repetition.
Mm-hmm.
And he was finally diagnosed, like, in this whole process with dyslexia.
Yeah.
But he was, I think he went to Hollywood when he was 18 or
Right.
20
He
or
prob-
something, and
he's
he
probably-
never knew.
Probably found so many ways to
Overcome.
accommodate, like,
Mhm.
compensate. I'm thinking of the
Compensate,
word
yeah.
I'm thinking of, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
that's what kids do too. Like,
yeah.
sometimes they're such good compensators that you don't even notice, like things that they don't know.
Yeah, I worked, where was I? It doesn't matter. I worked at a place when I was younger, and I remember giving something in writing to someone in the maintenance staff, and the head of facilities was like, we don't give him anything in writing.
Okay.
We tell him,
Mm-hmm.
and then we tell him again, and then we tell him one more time
Mm-hmm.
over a series, whatever.
Yeah.
And I bet you he had dyslexia.
Right.
that no one ever told him.
Yeah. Dyslexia is very specific. You could have some kind of a language-based learning disorder.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
So it's so interesting.
I
So-
had a I don't know why I'm thinking of this now. Thinking in terms of like kids, young kids. Like I'm thinking, let's say first grade, whatever, kindergarten, first grade. Some of the students are, like it says in this definition, here, like these difficulties are often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities. So like,
They're so smart.
yeah, or I've like they seem great. Like I'm thinking of this one particular. I don't know. It's so funny that this popped into my head. It's my son. I taught in the same school as both of my kids, so it had pluses and minuses. Pluses and minuses, more pluses. And when my son went to first grade, of course, I couldn't have him in my own class. So he went to this other fabulous first grade teacher, Miss Kathy Brown. She was amazing. And so I had some other kids, and many of the kids were his friends, or over the years became his good friends. So I'm thinking of this one particular boy, that's my son's friend, who the mom was also, both parents were teachers in high school, and the mother was a special ed teacher. So they've got skills, they know what's going on. And so when he was in preschool, I think he has an August birthday. So he's in preschool. So they decided, he's a boy, he's going to August birthday, whatever. He's, having a little difficulty with probably naming letters. I don't know exactly, but something, the parents thought, let's hold him preschool and let's start him the following year. So he's now in first grade, and he's a whole year older than all the other kids, and fabulous kid, like just a outstanding personality, like no issues with like expressive language, vocabulary. He was quite good in math, like that came really easily to him. But his reading really gave him difficulty. And I feel like with some young students, they can't quite articulate to an adult to be like, listen, I can do all these things. I'm great at math. Like I can play sports. I have friends. And I'm looking, and why can't I read these words? Like
Right.
I'm watching my friends. It's coming close. They're reading away. They're reading out loud. They're
Yeah,
no
I've
trouble.
got one sentence in the last hour.
Yeah, and I'm like struggling, and they're kind of like trying to mask it a little bit. Like I remember him trying to be like real compensating, like making him you think like, oh yeah, I don't have a problem, and so it was really, really, really difficult for him. And at that time. This was a while, he's, how old is he now? 25, 26 now. At that time, like I didn't have this, I thought I knew a lot of things about teacher reading, so I was doing the best I could. And so he needed some strategic help, and, his pride, like his self-esteem, he didn't want to be kind of singled out almost and be put with other kids that maybe other kids knew that couldn't read as well, you know what I mean? So I would have to come up with kind of like creative ways of helping him. So I'd pull him in the morning, like, hey, I need a little help with this, and we'd have the letter charts out here or there. So I'd have to kind of build it in throughout the day, come over at snack time, like, so
Yeah.
it wasn't so obvious. But I feel like that happens a lot. Like, they've got other great abilities. It's not that they have like tremendous strengths, or they're like, gifted in any way, but they have other really great abilities, and they're like, why can't I do this? Like, this is hard. Why is this so difficult?
Right.
And they can't quite articulate that at that age, you know?
Right.
So that's something, that's just an observation. As you were talking, it kind of popped into my mind.
And that's a really good point, too, because if you could say that part again, it's like independent of other. Can you say that again?
Yeah, I'll read that part again. So it's neurobiological in origin, again, characterized by those difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition and poor spelling and decoding abilities. So it's like more like a word level issue. Dyslexia itself, that word dyslexia,
which has all kinds of letters, which say, like, if you can't spell dyslexia,
Yeah.
you have dyslexia. I feel like, you know, I can't spell dyslexia.
Right.
I have to look it up every single time.
DYS. So, this comes from the Latin layer of...
Okay. This will help me.
of language, meaning difficulty. And lexia is from the Greek layer, lexis, meaning with words.
Oh.
So dyslexia is difficulty with words.
Yeah.
So, but then that part of that these difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language is often unexpected in relation to those other cognitive abilities.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you read them a story and tell them a story, their listening comprehension is outstanding. Their understanding the vocabulary, they can retell the story to you, boom, 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 better than you could yourself.
Because that's spoken and that's not affected.
It's not affected, but you put a story in front of them and they can't read the words.
Yeah, yeah.
So that then affects the comprehension, and also then in later, like if they're not reading those words and they're not able to read books, meaty books with like interesting vocabulary and things like that, their vocabulary decreases because you're not exposed to it. I mean, different if you're avid, like you're listening to stories and things like that. But if that's not taking place and you're not reading on your own, your exposure is limited. So throughout the years, those things kind of wane, and then it becomes, then there's the compounding issues because of that as well. So,
yeah, and I had because I loved reading itself. I did it as a child. I was an only child, so
me too. And so was my nephew.
My nephew. As only children, and I grew up in a time where your parents didn't play with you; they sent you off to be quiet.
Oh my gosh, I hope my mother's not listening to this. But I'm going off on a tangent for a second. I just told my daughter this same thing because I'm a grandma now. I have a 19-month grandson, which is what brought me to New Hampshire. Yeah, as I'm originally from New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
19 months, he must just be yummy.
Oh, he's so fabulous, and it's so interesting now because I'm like with what I know, like to watch his language development and what he's doing. I was like, oh, look at this, but what was it? Oh yeah, so talking about like your parents didn't. Yeah. You just did your own thing. And you're thinking you're an only child. You think your parents would be like, oh my gosh, she doesn't have anybody else to play with. I gotta play.
Go outside.
Yeah, but it was like you did everything. I learned a lot because I taught myself a lot of things. Yeah, and I was very independent. But it was like my mother would have like. I was just telling my daughter this, like just kind of something that like occurred to me, like a memory. Now it's my perception. I feel like if my mother was here, she'd be like, "Oh my god, that wasn't a lot. It wasn't that way."
Right.
But like. She was always present. Like my mother, she stayed home. She didn't work. She didn't work when I was young. She went back to work when I was in high school. My dad worked all the time. So I'd have like a little kitchen. Just for example, I have like I can vividly see it. I have like a kitchen set in my kitchen. My mother'd be there. She'd be cooking away, but I'd be playing totally on my own. And so like the reason why it came up is like talking about like early on, like things that parents can do at home with their children at this very young ages before they even get to school. These precursors is oral language development. So, when your child is playing in the kitchen and you're thinking, oh, good, they're occupied. I'm going to go over here and do something else. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Of course you do that.
We need some breaks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying, but like, just like getting down on that level with your child and having these quality interactions where they're and trying to keep it so it's like there's a there's a book out, but they didn't coin the term. It's called Strive for Five, by Sonia Cabell and I think Trisha Zucker, I think her name is. They're doc PhDs, and they didn't coin the term, but I think it's a new book out through Scholastic. I think it came out in 2024, but it's called Strive for Five. Is kind of those quantity over quality. Am I saying that right? Quantity and quality interactions as opposed to quality. So it's like try to keep that conversation going for 5 turns. So so the child is playing in the kitchen, and you ask them a question, and then if they respond back, you might want to kind of like evaluate that and say and restate it or recast it, say another way, draw another question out, ask another question. So it's like parent or teacher, child or student, parent, child, parent, child, parent. So it's like kind of keep that conversation going for 5 turns to draw that language out. So, I'm putting all these pieces together, and I'm like, my mother never did anything like that with me. I used to love school. I loved school. That's probably why I became a teacher. I loved elementary school. I had like a big blackboard. I was over there talking away to myself, doing things like that. But I don't remember my mother pulling up a chair and discussing
being a student for you for 5 minutes,
having some quality conversational turns.
5 turns.
Yeah. Well,
she wasn't Hannibal Lecter. Quick pro Clarice. We're not doing this.
She's like, and she was going to tell me more about that picture.
Well, I joke that we should call both of my parents have passed away.
Oh.
Neither can defend themselves against me.
Oh, I know. That's
and
true.
I have a radio show. This is so mean, right?
I know.
But the joke of it is too that we should just call, I shouldn't call my mom and dad mom and dad. I should call them Priscilla and Sal because they're people.
Yes.
And it was specific to a time period.
Yes.
No one's parents were playing with them.
No.
Everyone's parents kicked them out of the house. How are they going to keep a clean house
right.
if you were in it?
Right.
They needed time, But I can't tell you, children, I think, they call them free-range children when there's a 12-year-old. And one woman, I read this article, and her son wanted to take the train by himself to a particular location. And he was like 12 or 14. And in their town, there were rules about when children could be left alone. And he was not of the age that he could even be left alone in a house, let alone do this thing. So she had to give him like a note or a pass about why he would be alone. And I'm like, I played outside alone at 5 and 6 years old until I found another kid.
Oh, yeah. I was taking my bike. We lived in the area where I grew up in New Jersey. It was a city. And I'd be like, say it. Like, I would go.
So, and this wasn't child abuse. No one needed to be, the police didn't call. I'm okay. And I know there were children, and everyone always says, well, it's a different world today, which there is a lot of. I would argue that children not playing outside and playing in front of a screen so you can see them is twice as harmful as a child playing outside. True. Because I feel like I'm street. Like I'm a little street. I'm a little city and I'm a little street because don't get run over. Don't go in a stranger's van. Like get a good feeling from someone. Don't get close to this. Like, and
it builds independence. Like you feel like, okay, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I can do this.
Absolutely. So I forget. I think we were originally talking about how it's a different world now. So I was talking to a woman about how being a grandparent is different now. And maybe we don't have the energy when my grandparents took care of me because they didn't have to play with me the entire time. Where now, if I take my grandkid to the park, I physically have to play with them. I'm taking you to the park so you can play with other children. But those other children are also playing with their parents, right? And how do we, it's different and it's better in a lot of ways, but maybe it's worse in some way.
Right. This brings me to something else I was thinking about recently. I think having a grandson has brought up some memories and things like that. Yeah. So talking about, all has to do... it relates to oral language. It does relate to what we're talking about. But like you said, so when I go, I usually go there, visit once a week. My daughter works, and I watch him, and I've got nothing going on. I'm there to, do
interact
my thing,
with your grandchild.
have quality conversational turns, strive for 5. Oh, tell me about this. oh, let's expand that. Why?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm loving having that knowledge base and consciously doing that.
Yes.
So I said to my daughter recently, I was like, oh, like how cool that is that I can kind of focus on that. I have nothing else going on at that day. I'm there to be a grandma and do those things. And I was like, I think if I could go back in time, there's not much I would do differently. I choices and things I've made, I'll learn from them. But when my kids got to school age, so my two kids are 4 years apart, and I feel like at one point, when they were in kindergarten, first and second grade, I was teaching and we were busy. I feel like everything, did we even have quality conversations? Because I felt like everything was like, best I can say this, and I think I heard this somewhere, it was like task language. Like I'd come home like,
do this,
oh my
don't
God,
do this.
do you have your backpack? Okay, hurry up. We got to go have a snack because we got to go get to, this or that. And I was like, did we even ever sit down?
I love you.
I feel like we
love you.
did. Yeah, like, tell me about your day. I heard recently, like, that was like a big, those minutes coming home from school.
Yeah.
When kids came home from school, that's a big time where you can have those conversations. We weren't. My kids were home. My husband worked from home. He'd pick them up at the bus stop, and they'd be home already ahead of me. And I'd come in like frantic, like, okay, what's the next thing? And then the joke is like, on days where I would be having to bring them to school, I'm always rushing. I just have I'm not good with my time management. I'm always rushing, so I was rushing out the door, and we'd get to the bus stop, and I would leave them at the bus stop, and I go off to school, and it was almost like, oh, I'd be opening the door. Okay, get up. Like there was no like, have a great time. Like we weren't having a conversation. I was like, okay, see ya. I'm like, okay, have you guys been scarred because of this?
Are you okay? Do you need therapy? Do you want mommy to pay for therapy?
Right. Yeah. That's what my best friend says that. Listen.
So my mother used to tell me she was going to pay for my therapy.
My
and
best
what
friend
I held,
Tracy says that all the time. Like,
what I hold against her is I paid my own therapy. That was that.
Yeah.
But and so she was acknowledging, like, you work this out later with someone else, not with me.
It's true. It's true.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Like, well, builds character. We always say builds character.
It builds character. It gives you stories for later.
Right. But like thinking about all of these things, and I'm teaching.
So my parent, like you, we talked about this a little bit before the show started, and I'm staying on task. And just when we come up to the top of the hour, we're going to come back for the second hour. We will get to a little bit more. Like I want to ask you.
I would talk a little bit about the type of instruction or Gillingham instruction and things
also,
like that.
Can you test for this? Can a parent test their child for this?
You can have your child tested, but usually what happens, like me as a dyslexia specialist, like I'm not qualified to do that. I can do a screening components, like a screening, and I can do like some diagnostic testing to see where the weak areas are. But in order to be diagnosed, like a diagnosis of dyslexia, usually that comes, when the children in school through a child study team, and needs a battery of tests given by, usually your school a psychologist would do that to get an IQ score. Excuse me. Sorry. The social worker would do like a history, a family history. The educational battery would be done by formalized testing. And
so what about homeschool kids?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So I would suggest like you can do outside testing. I don't know, like if how like a pediatrician, usually your pediatrician does like, test for like ADD or autism, and, maybe reach out to the pediatrician, or like even go on the International Dyslexia Association website. There is tons of information regarding,
resources,
where to get, formalized testing, and they even have like tutors, certified tutors, or Gillingham tutors in your area that people go, you can find somebody if the school isn't providing, or you feel like you need
like
more
additional
one-on-one.
help. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, I don't remember learning to read. I remember phonics. And they got rid of phonics, which I don't know why. I feel like...
Well, it's back.
Is it back? Yes.
It's back.
Yes.
Back in a big way, actually.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Because I felt like reading was extremely easy with some of those basic foundational things. And now I feel like they've taken math, and now everything has to be made 10. And I didn't learn that kind of math.
Oh, like, yeah.
And they've got triangles, and they like make it 10 triangles and then take out the triangles. And I'm like... I
when
don't
you
even
look
know-
at that, it seems more confusing.
I'm like, I would never know math now.
Yeah.
If
I wasn't good at math.
I was really good at math. And again,
Oh.
I don't know how I was good at math.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how so my cousin homeschooled her children.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one time we're trying to do the clock. And I've got one of her daughters, and I'm taking her for a couple of days to the pool and various things. So I'm supposed to be doing homework.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't know how to tell you how to do this. You just have to know it. Like,
Well,
I don't know how I know how to tell time. I don't know how to
yeah.
explain this to you.
It brings me back to like
I never wanted to be a teacher. I don't know what I'm doing over here. Why is she with me? Like, give this book away. We're doing pool, and
you can't explicitly instruct.
I don't know how
Break it down, scaffold it to make it easier steps for her.
I can do that for a recipe.
Yeah.
Only because I can tell you, because I've physically done it,
Mm-hmm.
what to avoid, what to do, but also what to avoid. I don't know how to do that with math
Yeah.
or English.
Well,
or
I didn't, like when I was in school, I'm trying to think back. I'm teaching a course right now on emergent literacy, and when the students are introducing themselves, one of the things I ask, like, what is your earliest memory of learning to read or write? So it kind of brought me back, and I didn't have trouble reading. I learned to read. I don't know
Young?
how, and
Yeah.
I was a good reader, and I could comprehend, like when we did those standardized tests, I was always scoring in the 99 percentile, like high, like I did fine. So like I remember being in school. I don't remember like learning letters or anything like that. I obviously did,
Right.
but like I remember being in first grade and we'd be sitting on the floor, and the teachers out there with their flashcards. I'm gonna say, I'm not making fun. I'm just kind
Yeah.
of setting a stage, because I did it as a teacher, and all the kids are sitting on the floor, and she held up a word. I don't know why I vividly remember it. The word on the card was turtle. And she showed it to one student. They didn't know it. Showed another student. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there. I'm like, oh my God, the word is turtle. Like, how come they don't know this?
What's wrong with
And
you?
then she came to me and it was like, turtle. And I just said it like this.
Like, bring out bigger words. I need bigger words, more syllables. Let's go.
And now I'm thinking, I'm like, oh my God, the word turtle in first grade that
It's
has
hard.
a UR, that's an R-controlled syllable, and then it has a consonant LE at the end with TLA. So those skills in first grade are not explicitly taught. You don't get to R-controlled syllables and consonant LE in first grade. So
I didn't even know any of those words you just said. I don't know
syllable
any of those
types.
words.
Yeah. So breaking it down, that's part of that systematic explicit instruction that you use to teach
Oh,
students
is that why
how.
you said the word scaffolding before?
Yeah. Well, yeah, scaffolding is like breaking things down in smaller parts. Those are like kind of, I'm going to use the word buzz. They're great words, and
Yes.
they mean, but they're
Yeah.
they're
so-
terms that are used in.
Yeah, so I never
instruction.
wanted to, like, God bless teachers, because I didn't ever have that desire.
Yeah.
Um,
So when I became a teacher,
we're
Pick
gonna
it
hold
up?
this. Yeah,
Pick
we're
it
gonna,
up? Okay.
We're gonna pick up. This is Lisa and Robyn on the mic. I am here with dyslexia expert Heather Fowler.
I don't know about expert.
Expert?
It's you know.
And you're listening.
I'm still
on-
learning.
you're listening on WSMN 95.3 FM, 1590 AM. We are going to go to the top of the hour, and we're going to resume this conversation when we return. Talk to you soon.
WSMN 1590. WSMN 95.3 FM Nashua. Listen, watch, and stream at WSMN.live.
ABC News, I'm Sherry Preston. President Trump planning to sign an executive order today that would call for the shutdown of the U.S. Department of Education. Here's ABC's Rachel Scott.
The Department of Education does oversee funding to help low-income students and students with disabilities. It enforces civil rights laws to prevent discriminations in schools. It also oversees the process for students applying for college financial aid at a federal level. Now, the administration insists that none of those programs are going to be impacted, but it is unclear how. And we are learning that today there are multiple protests popping up across the country, with some teachers very concerned that their students are going to pay the price.
The Trump administration also said to be planning to designate a swath of land where the military would be granted new authority to hold migrants who have crossed the border from Mexico. The Israeli military says it'll no longer allow Palestinians to enter northern Gaza from the south. A blockade has been reestablished. Airstrikes over the Strip overnight killed more than 85 Palestinians. This is ABC News.
I'm still going for it, even with higher stroke risk from atrial fibrillation, and a regular heartbeat not caused by a heart valve problem. Over a 3-year study, Eliquis apixaban tablets reduced stroke risk better than warfarin, and over 97% of Eliquis patients did not experience a stroke. A first stroke occurred in 2.9% of warfarin patients versus 2.3% of Eliquis patients.
Don't stop taking prescription Eliquis without asking your doctor. It may increase your stroke risk. Eliquis can cause serious and in rare cases fatal bleeding. Don't take Eliquis if you have an artificial heart valve, abnormal bleeding, or antiphospholipid syndrome. While taking, you may bruise more easily or take longer for bleeding to stop. A spinal injection while on Eliquis increases risk of blood clots, which may cause paralysis, the inability to move. Get medical help right away for unexpected bleeding, unusual bruising, or tingling, numbness, or muscle weakness. Medications such as aspirin products, NSAIDs, SSRIs, SNRIs, and blood thinners may increase bleeding risk. Tell your doctor about all planned medical or dental procedures. Learn more at Eliquis.com or call 1-855-ELIQUIS.
Continuing the legacy started in 1904, Roger Pellerin of Gate City Monument Incorporated continues to provide the same high-quality monument, custom headstone,